A little bit later, so welcome to our session on cartography and commercialization in Alaska. And we have two presenters within this session. We're very happy to have all the way from Central Florida, Jared Friedland. Jared is a graduate student at the University of Central Florida. And he's going to, he has some slides and images. He's going to talk about some very early and unique cartography issues in developing the impression and identification of Alaska. So without further ado, I think when Jared is done, we'll take some questions. And then we'll go to the next presenter. Jared?
Hi everyone. Today I'm going to give my presentation on Alaskan Identity, views from Alaskan Cartography. Alaska, the Great White North. These names define the final piece to have a complete image of the New World. This region branches the Old World and New World thousands of years ago and was lost for generations. With it being rediscovered by the European powers during the 1500s, the question that this leaves after this rediscovery is how to examine and use this land for political and economic gain throughout this region. This presentation will show countries like Russia, England, France, and the United States and how they sent cartographers to map the final frontier in North America and in the New World. While this presentation will examine these countries from the 1500s to the 1800s, it will also discuss the cartographers and their vision of Alaska during this time frame. But first, I want to show you how Alaska is shown in today's society. Yeah. So this is two versions. So this is a national map of the United States, and you see Alaska, tiny Alaska, right here. But then you see the Alaskan view of Alaska, and you see Alaska giant with mountainscapes, river valleys, and then you see a tiny America right here with Hawaii, almost the same size as Hawaii. And this is to show that there is different views of Alaska, even today, how we see size compared to different regions of the world. These maps really show the national identity of Alaska versus the statehood of Alaska. And now the next slide. So this is so now the first map I want to show is one of the first maps and images of Alaska. To understand the timeline of events that led to the rediscovery of Alaska, we need to go back to the 1500s. In 1550, Russia was ruled by Ivan the Terrible, and he was pushing people out of Russia to create his new version of the Russian Empire. Among these groups were many religious groups that were escaping to the foreign land known as Alaska. In the article, The Russians and the Prey Bearing Alaska, Theodore S. Farley writes how the internal powers of the Russian Empire caused this immigration to Alaska. Farley used letters from the monk named Geronimo, who recorded the history of the migration through personal letters. These letters show 4,165 miles of travel from these refugees from the Russian Empire, so from Moscow all the way to Alaska by foot and by sea. These letters false forms of documentation of travel and distance to this foreign land. With these letters, understanding the location of this land of the refugees would help establish a Russian and first European presence in Alaska. Farley writes that it took the Russian Empire almost 200 years after the first immigrants to map out the land of Alaska. And this new frontier, this mapping of this new frontier is one of the first attempts created in 1941 by a Russian-funded company to find resources and fishing areas to benefit the Russian Empire, and this will start the race of countries to map out this regions of the world. So in 1741 is the year many scholars will point to the forced explorations and mapping of the Alaskan territory. While the Russians were the first to start mapping the region, it would take 40 years to produce the map of Alaska. So since the expedition 1741, it would be until 1781 when this map was created of the Alaskan territory. The name of this map translates to the map of new discoveries in the Eastern Ocean. This map shows the islands that connect Russia to Alaska and an outline of Alaska through what they could see on by ship, because they never did any land expeditions, only by water. So you see this crude outline of the Alaskan territory. The outline of Alaska map shows, yes. While this map was created in 1781, Catherine the Great would be honored by one of the cartographers as named as the lead cartographer, because she was funding this expedition, so she gets the rights to help expand the Russian Empire. So she got her name on this map. With this new expedition, other Europeans will send their own expeditions to the region to map out and expand their own empire in the Americas. Next slide. The French were the closest Western European power to the Alaskan period during the 1700s. The French Empire would send teams of explorers and cartographers to the forests of Canada to expand the foothold in the Americas. The first expedition to this region of the world was during the end of the French and Indian War. In 1762, a year before the end of the French and Indian War, the French sent Jean des Javard and his team to expand the French territory in the Americas to maintain their presence in the Americas in case they lost land during the peace negotiations. The French expedition was by land, and they want to see where the land of Canada meets the Pacific Ocean. They followed a river that led to the Great Waterway during the travels and found that it fed to the Pacific Ocean. So they took this river from the Louisiana Territory, and they followed this river all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And they found this great lake. So they mapped out this great big lake that's not there, because they saw it as a great big lake that fed into the Pacific Ocean. And then so north of this lake is actually the region of Alaska. They actually did the first land images of Alaska from this great body of water. And then you can see in the red area is the British, it's a bit little faded, but this is the British Empire during this time. And then all this blue and yellow is the French Empire. So you can really see the French claiming this land already when they send their team to make sure they can have their land double the British Empire during this time. This map translates to the North American divided into principal states. And this, like I stated, the French Empire was dividing the land up to the different empires.
What year is that?
This year is 1762. So about 20 years before the Russians mapped their land of Alaska. So the French was focused on expanding the territory, so they created the rough draft of the New World. The next slide, please. There you go. So while this expedition helped expand the French Empire, the French will send another expedition team to confirm this map. In 1772, 4 years before the American Revolutionary War, the French sent Robert Vendy and his team to confirm the map from 1762. Robert family was a prominent genealogist and cartographer in French society. So his family name on this map to confirm this map will make it the standard for this map, for the map of this region for France, because their family had no people in high places. They became almost like the royal cartographers for the French Empire during this time. As you can see, that they made a little bit of changes to the map that we saw previously with the water with more rivers going to Alaska, the waterway that fed into the Pacific Ocean shrunk drastically. And you see a much more detailed version of the map of Alaska. So yeah, next slide. So while the French was focused on expanding its land territory in the Americas, the British Empire tried to regain its control over America by looking westward. In 1799, almost 20 years after the American Revolutionary War, the British would send George Vancouver by ship to map the Northwest Territory. After losing the east coast of North America, the British wanted to see if there were different pathways to the colonies in Canada. George Vancouver would map out Cook's Inlet and the Anchorage Islands. These islands will show the water pathways for trade and military bases that the British Empire planned for the future in North America. So as you can see, the different Cook Islands, and we are about right here. So it's pretty cool to see the British influence on the map, looking for the trade routes, and because Vancouver City is more like the Chesapeake Bay area with this inlet, and using Captain Cook's versions of the islands during his expeditions to create this new map for British intent for Alaska. So then the question is, the United States map, where is the United States map during this time? Well, the United States will begin after the American Revolution, began spreading westward. First, they will send A.W. Greenlee, a military geologist and cartographer, to the edge of North America to map out the rest of the French territory in North America and the British territory. However, A.W. Greenlee would only write about the environment, never draw out the environment, so that future cartographers of America could draw out this environment once they have a foothold in the western regions. And this is why we don't see American maps coming from this time frame, but in the mid to late 1800s and early 1900s. So this is why early Alaskan cartography would show the different Alaska by its coast, internal land, and rivers. Why people settled in Alaska from the Russian Empire in the 1550s. The first map will come out 200 years later. Russia, England, and France, and the United States would send these cartographers to map the final frontier of North America and the New World. While Alaska will have many names, it will always be known as the last frontier of the New World. Thank you.
Okay. 4. Ooh.
Yeah, what was holding back the English map of the US in the late 1700s that kept them from actually drawing out the map?
Well, you have to, so the British just lost the American colonies, so they only had the Canadian colonies, but the French still had their colonies in Canada. So trying to get through the land through the French territory, well, you can't do that because they're still enemies during this time. So they would have to go all around the world to find this new land and try to say, hey, we can go attack you from both sides, friend, in case they want to control all of Canada. Okay. Any more questions?
Any other questions?
Yes.
Could you clarify the settlement prior to 1741?
So it was refugees, Russian religious refugees from Ivan the Terrible. So Ivan the Terrible was terrible. He was Russian religious, trying to create his new version of the Russian Empire. And the religious community wasn't part of that vision. So what he did was massacre them, or they would fled to Western Europe, where we should get Orthodox religions into Western Europe. But then they also fled to Siberia. But they kept moving because Ivan's terrible armies kept chasing them and killing them. So they go to the edges of Siberia to build boats and then sail to this new Alaska. And the person, the author, found letters from these monks and in churches and on the islands of Alaska and on the tips of Alaska that talked about these travels and all that. They're doing dead of night in the Siberian cold, which is, I don't know, it's pretty cold. It's amazing. Yeah,
I want to follow up on what she was just asking about the Russians. So some of these religious refugees, were they all believers?
yes. So they don't, so they travel to, because I think they were trying to make him like he was a theologic monarch through Russia, make him the leader of the church and everything. So they were trying to get out and they didn't believe him, so they went out and trying to escape to Russia.
And you do know that there's communities of those nearby here on Kenneck Peninsula?
Yes,
But again, how do we know that? I mean, you mentioned letters.
yes, so
Those
the
letters, how did they get back, those letters get back?
the letters never got back to Russia. That's why it took 200 years for the Russians to even map out the region of Alaska. They kept the letters in the churches and the monasteries here in Alaska. And this the person Theodore Foley was a military US military scout that went to these monasteries and found these letters that describe this travel 500 years 200 years later. So it's pretty amazing to have these letters kept secret in the monasteries in Alaska, because they didn't want the Russians to know that they were in Alaska, because what they would just come and kill them. So they kept it secret in the group in the monasteries and churches here in Alaska.
In your earlier French maps, you were saying that actually France pretty much mapped out a portion of Alaska as their territory. How
Yes.
far did that extend?
Well, for them, it's then all the way to the Arctic Circle for
Oh.
them. But in reality, it was the Anchorage area. They never got to like the Fairbanks area, even though they had a vision of what Alaska would look. They only got to the Anchorage area because that's where the bay was, that's where the resources were. So why go up, just create almost like the Virginia territory where the straight line that goes all forever. Because they didn't map it out yet, so what they did was just create this image saying, oh, anything north of this is off still, so that's how they created that.
And were they actually physically, let's say, in the Anchorage area, or did they use other maps to finish that?
They did through the rivers and through the waterways, were in the Anchorage area for a little bit, and then they had to report the findings back, so they traveled up and then went back to French controlled Canada.
Do you have names or dates for an expedition, a French expedition to the Anchorage area?
Yes, I thought I said the name, in 1762, Dennis, Jarvis. I can send you the names and everything,
Sure, yeah.
because it's very interesting, these expeditions.
Including some, but I never heard of them in Cook Island.
Well, the Wrangell map is published in 1839, but, years ago, in the 1987 edition of Shin Pete's Alaska, we have the names as far north as Toklat Village in straight north of Cook Inlet, and Upper Copper River Village at Natasha are on that map in mostly in Dena'ina versions. And so there's no exploration of those areas as much as sketches that were drawn. It probably even here in Kenai maybe, or Nita is on that map. So that's the Dena'ina name for the village at the mouth of Matanuska River. So that's a good guess that the person who drew those maps was from there, and there was no exploration of those areas whatsoever. There were recorded names, but the names are all corroborated, and they're corroborated in some detail so that you recognize the Pan Lake, Tatik that is on there, and Butte Lake and Dead Man Lake are on there for sure in the accurate names. So the detail is really remarkable on the map, and it's published in 1839, but those sketch maps might have been done 10 years earlier.
Yeah, thanks. Any other questions? Comments? Thank you very much, Derek. Thank you.
So bad. He's a grad student and it's like, ooh.
So our next presentation is on the centers on a film created by the Alaska Jewish Museum in Anchorage. And Penelope Goforth, longtime member of our board, and many people know her in Alaska as a journalist and a writer of many topics in Alaska, is not with us as she had hoped to be because for health reasons. But I believe we have online Leslie Freed, who is the curator of the.
Can you hear me okay?
So, oh, there she is. And so, Leslie, would you?
Yes.
I think we're going to have enough time to show the film. Would you like to introduce it, please?
Yes. Yes, everyone can see and hear me okay?
And you have to unmute.
I did unmute. I did.
Raise your volume and unmute. We're working on it. Can you give me a talk now, Leslie, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little louder.
Louder.
Okay, okay. Let me see if I can turn my thing louder.
Sounding good.
I don't know why it's not going louder, but I'll just talk loudly.
That's good. Thank you, Leslie. Just go
I'm
for it.
screaming now.
Yeah, we may have to extend to see the whole film to go into the break time a little bit, but we'll get there. Leslie, go.
Alrighty, so thank you everybody for attending this session. Am I talking too loudly now?
No.
Okay. My cat ran away. I'm talking so loudly. It's like in my room. Anyway, thank you for attending. We decided to really focus on this little film for a couple of reasons. One of which, the people that attended the official opening of the exhibit at the museum and the Alaska Jewish campus were people that had a lot to say about the ACC. The president of the ACC, the former COO of the ACC, the Penelope Goforth, myself, Perry Eaton, who was involved with the ACC, but also is an incredible historian and artist, Alaskan artist. So I thought it would be cool to make that into a little movie. And also because Penelope has been facing some pretty intense health odds this week. And so this will allow you to hear her talking as well. And thank you. I'm not sure what else I can say, except that we are going to create a book through this exhibit. Beginning with this exhibit, there will be some additional parts that we will add that are not currently in the exhibit. But anyway, I hope you enjoy this. Thank you.
Well, I first got the idea for doing this exhibit when I went to their 150th anniversary celebration. And when Rex Wilhelm, former COO and president of the ACC, read a letter written by one of the founders, Louis Gerstel, I listened to that letter and I was amazed that he mentioned that the company followed the mandates of 3 tenets of Judaism, basically, and I thought, that's interesting. This could be a great exhibit. And Penelope and I went to that event. And when I mentioned to the president of the Canadian part of the Northwest Company my idea, he said, yeah, that would be fantastic. So that was a few years ago. And so we've just continued to acquire information, do research, and until we got to the point where we could figure this out. And with COVID and all of that, and people doing more and more online, I thought, we can make this happen. We can make this happen. Anyway, I would like to acknowledge people that were involved in this, and I'll go through it kind of quickly. Buzz Rolfing of E Street Audio, who's here today as we speak. Actually, he's photographing me right now, I think. Daniel Cornwall, Information Services Staff, Alaska State Library. Dennis McLean, creator of the SS Dora model, which is featured at the Seward Museum and is a 3D, is represented in 3D imagery on this new exhibit. Leslie Freund, Senior Museum Scientist, Phoebe A. Hurst Museum of Anthropology. Monica Shah, Deputy Director, Collections and Conservation, Anchorage Museum. The people at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, where we did a lot of research. Res 3D, Dov Margalit's company, who did the modeling, the 3D modeling. Resurrection Bay Historical Society, Sam Salkin, former president of the CEO of the Alaska Commercial Company. Sandra Johnston, library assistant, the State Library Historical Collections, Seward Community Library and Museum, and the list goes on and on. UAA Consortium Library, Steve Hendrickson, Curator of Collections, Alaska State Museum. And I felt I needed to say these names because they were pretty crucial. So I'll just start my little intro, and then after that I'll be reading just part of remarks made by Stephen Haycox, who could not be here today. He's fantastic historian of the state of Alaska, professor emeritus of UAA. So that'll follow. So today, in addition to this historic convention of Western States Chabad rabbis, we are introducing our new exhibit, which you've heard the title of numerous times now, From Purchase to Prosperity. In it, we explore the backgrounds of the founders of the ACC and how the 3 principles of Judaism played a major role in the running of their outposts/stores in the Alaska territory and still do today. The Alaska Commercial Company was founded as a California corporation in October of 1868 in San Francisco by a group of prosperous, mostly German Jewish merchants who collectively possessed all the talents and know-how needed to create a flourishing enterprise. Jewish merchant pioneers, including Louis Sloss and Louis Gerstel, appealed to Senator Cornelius Cole of California, who was a school friend, by the way, of William Seward, U.S. Secretary of State, to obtain from the Russian government through diplomatic channels the right of succession to the assets of the Russian-American company. It was because of this lobbying effort through Cole that Seward decided to purchase Russian America. This timed perfectly with the public announcement of the Russian government's intention to sell. By the time that Hutchinson Coal and Company acquired ownership of the Russian American Company holdings, the RAC, or Russian American Company, had nominally ruled Alaska for over a century. Now, the above consortium of merchants became the Alaska Commercial Company 1 year after the purchase. Their focus was on establishing a foothold in Alaska due to the rich potential of the Pribilof Island fur seal trade. Eventually, this goal was realized, and for the next 2 decades, The ACC enjoyed a near monopoly on not only the fur seal trade, but also transport comestibles and other supplies marketed within Alaska. As many as 86 trading posts studied the quote-unquote westward, as Alaska north and west of Sitka was known as. Posts included Kodiak, Unalaska, St. Michael. So basically, the ACC was the most far-reaching mercantile empire during the formation of Alaska's American period, as Alaska evolved from colonial status to statehood in 1958. So we probably don't have a lot of time to read all of Steve's comments, so I'll pick a few, and especially the ones that praise me, of course, and Penelope. Let's see here, what did he say? I hate to cut anything out. Steve Haycox is an amazing scholar here on Alaska history. So let's see. Thank you for the opportunity to prepare a few remarks for this inspiring celebration. I express my gratitude to Rabbi Greenberg and to Leslie Freed. I treasure the previous opportunities extended to me to address this congregation, and I deeply regret that I cannot join you in person now. Freed and her cohort here in this exhibit, Penelope Goforth, have constructed a striking, thorough, and necessary exhibit. I hope you will give it all the time it deserves for impression and reflection. The founders of the ACC were competent men who brought business acumen, determination, persistence, and most notably, fairness and veracity to their enterprise in Alaska. The exhibition shows that clearly, and I want to call your attention to a salient aspect of this. It's important to note the context in which they worked. Alaska was not gold and salmon in 1870. This was a decade before the start of either of those developments in Alaska. In 1870, resource development lay in whaling and fur sealing. Whaling had long since been dominated by investors in New England. The Russian-American company had exploited the fur seal rookeries in the Pribilofs. The American purchase of Russian America created an extraordinary opportunity for new American investment. Now, it involved cost, great risk, and required vision and courage. Any number of people might have undertaken that challenge, and a good many tried. What characterized the men who succeeded was perspective, vision, a sense of responsibility, and integrity. I'll just give a small amount. What I think is most significant about the exhibition is its demonstration of the integrity. When you look at it, I urge you to pay attention to the quotes from Prince Dmitry Maksutov, the last Russian-American governor, in the section of the exhibit on the ACC founders. Hayward Hutchinson and William Cole were among the many who sought to capitalize on the opportunity offered by the sale of Russian assets. To these men, Maksutov said, "You have treated me like gentlemen. You are the only men who have not tried to beat me out and cut my prices." This is the core of the exhibit and a marvelous find. For not only were the founders honorable in their approach to and dealings with the Russians, but also in their administration of the seal operation. They understood and imposed conservation of the resource rather than a careless, rapacious exploitation. At the same time, they humanized treatment of the Aleut workers and their families who slaughtered the seals and processed the pelts for shipping. They had been virtually enslaved by the Russians and lived and worked in deplorable conditions. The ACC ended that, and in their establishment and operation of stores in scores of Alaska villages, they mandated that business be executed with fairness and sensitivity.
Folks in Alaska, in Anchorage specifically, know what we do. When I first came to work 26 years ago, I asked the taxi driver to take me to the AC headquarters here in Anchorage, and he had no idea who we were, what we were. Kind of felt odd that I, being on my first day of work for the company, was actually educating somebody in Alaska about the company. So thank you very much. Well, good evening, everybody. I think I printed this large enough, I might not need my glasses, which doesn't happen very much anymore. I am the general manager at Alaska Commercial Company, and it is an incredible honor to be here. I'm quite humbled to be in this room with so many distinguished men and women. So, Rabbi, thank you for the invitation. Esty, thank you for inviting me. I would like to express my appreciation to both Rabbi Greenberg and Esty for their continued recognition of Alaska Commercial Company. I've known the Rabbi and Esty for well over a decade now, and through work with the Jewish community here, it was quite an honor 6 years ago to be recognized at that point in time for our 150th anniversary of the company. I doubt that its Jewish founders, Louis Gerstel and Louis Sloss, could have imagined 155 years ago what it would have become of the company that they created. That we are still in business and that we are still meeting the needs of the communities we serve in rural Alaska, and that we are in fact the largest retailer in rural Alaska. I would also like to recognize two amazing women. I would like to recognize through their dedication and hard work that this exhibit would not be possible. So Leslie Freed, who is a curator of the Alaska Jewish Museum, and Penelope Goforth, the Alaska Maritime historian that were involved in this exhibit, that the only reason we're here to celebrate today is because of these ladies' work. So thank you. It's an amazing, for those of you that might not have seen it yet, it is an amazing exhibit. You can see the love of these two ladies in every part of this exhibit that they put together. So again, both of you, thank you for your efforts. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for the passion that you put forth. It is definitely apparent in the exhibit that you put together. And I want to thank you for your vision and for your commitment. Thank you very much.
Where the AC stores are today, we service the Inupiat people, the Yupik people, Tsimshian, Haida, Athabaskan, and many other cultures within. And it is important in Alaska to acknowledge the history of the state and the indigenous peoples who make the state what it is today. Okay, well, Alaska Commercial Company today, as Walt said, is a thriving business with 35 stores across rural Alaska. And as Chris said, if you haven't been there, which most people in this room have not, the one thing maybe to know is that there are not roads into and out of these communities. These are some of the few communities in America that do not have the ability to drive there. You have to fly in and fly out. And AC has had as many as 86 trading posts throughout our multi-hundred-year history, as few as 15 when the company was teetering in the 70s and 80s. And we're happy to say is now thriving once again. But across those 35 stores, we think a lot about what we call the social license to operate in the communities in which we operate. Because life is hard in rural Alaska. It's remote, it's hard to access products, hard to access people. Costs are high when you're flying everything in. And so every time we reach a predicament, we're always asking ourselves, what is the right thing to do? What is the honorable, fair thing to do? Some recent examples, a few years ago when the airports in Bethel, in rural Alaska, Western Alaska, and in other communities were struggling with winter weather and so on, and food was starting to get in short supply in villages like Hooper Bay and Togiak and others. ACC chartered flights in direct from Anchorage, 48,000 pounds at a time, at no cost to the end recipient. Prices did not go up. In fact, we lost money on everything that was on those planes, but it was the right thing to do in rural Alaska, where food security is a real concern in small villages. When the store burned down in Stebbins last year, Walt, in fact, reached out to the community and said, what can we do to help? It doesn't matter that we might be competitors, we might be in a similar area. What can we do to support your community because your store burned down? In Kasiglak a couple of years ago, when also the store burned down and water was in short supply. In fact, someone in this room, Mike McCardle from our team, on a Friday night was calling and texting water distributors. On Saturday, water was on a plane to Kotzebue, and the next day it was en route to the village by Sunday. again, at no cost. This was not for sale. This was because it's the right thing to do. And a few years ago, when the USDA announced a program called the Farmers to Families Food Box Program, which was a President Trump program that was very successful in Alaska, we stepped up and advocated for rural Alaska so that the free produce and dairy and meat wouldn't just go to Anchorage, although there's a lot of need in Anchorage, but would also go to the small villages outside of Anchorage, Fairbanks, and elsewhere, and delivered, in that case, 3 million pounds of free food over 4 months to rural Alaska villages. So you've heard about the tenets of Jewish faith. One of them is charity, and that is something that we think about a lot, whether it's free food, whether it's donated food, whether it's at expense to us and at cost to us flying in food. We do take those 3 tenets of the Jewish faith seriously today, as we did several hundred years ago. So I'll wrap this up by reading the letter that Leslie mentioned from Louis Gerstle, a letter in 1886. So going back almost 150 years, that Louis Gerstle wrote to the agent in St. Michael, which is in Western Alaska. We still have an AC store in St. Michael today. So that store has lasted a very long time, or that trading post has lasted a long time. And in 1886, Louis Gerstle wrote to that manager and said the following: "Dear Sir," in fact, there's a lot of language in here that is very 1886-esque, so you'll have to read through the lines here. "Dear Sir, we have been informed that a large number of miners have already started to the Yukon and Stewart River mines, and it is probable that many others will be attracted to that section of the territory in consequence of the supposed existence of rich diggings in the district. Considering that the company's station in St. Michael is the nearest source of food, an extra amount of groceries has been sent to you to meet the possible demands likely in this coming winter." Back then, it was 1 shipment a year on the water to the community. That was the food for the year. So they were trying to plan ahead. "The shipment referred to is not made for the purpose of realizing profits beyond the regular schedule. Our object is to simply avoid any possible suffering which the large increase of population, insufficiently provided with food, might occasion. Hence, you are directed to store these sullies as a reserve to meet the probable contingency herein indicated, and to dispose in such quantities as will enable you to relieve the wants and necessities of each and every person that asks for it. In this connection, we deem it very necessary to say that you are not permitted to charge excessive profits, as the company must not permit itself to be made an instrument of oppression towards anyone that they may come in contact with. We should add that in the case of absolute poverty or want, the person placed in that unfortunate position should be promptly furnished with the means of subsistence without pay. Simply report these facts at your convenience to the Home Office in San Francisco. Asking your compliance with these instructions, and with kind regards to you and Mrs. Lorenz, yours truly, Louis Gerstle, President." So this letter from 1886, which was published in the San Francisco Examiner in July 1927, under the heading "A Corporation Showed Its Soul North of 53, has been reprinted several times. It's an example of some altruism. And even though that was 150 years ago, we still do operate today in a way that we believe is fair, reasonable, and honorable in accordance to the tenets of the Jewish faith and the original founders of the company. So thank you very much.
Well, I am a Lutic. I am from Kodiak. My family comes from the small village of Uzinki. And I've been involved with this venture before time. I am a direct descendant of the Russian-American company. Half of my family met the Russians when they came, and the other half was a hunter. And they came together, and throughout history, the clan was born. And we are Skvortsovs, and that's my family name. And it's interesting, I just thought I'd throw this in by way of introduction, if I can separate the papers here. Prince Matsutov was charged with disposing of the assets. And Hutchinson and Kroll and the interests went all in. They just laid it on the line. What's the price? All right, let's do it. They didn't mess around. They took a great risk. And on their way out, Prince Matsudov was charged with awarding land grants to indigenous peoples that had worked for the company and retired for the company. This is my family land grant, signed by Prince Matsudov. And I have the original. It's been handed down to the family. Okay, and I have a connection to the Russian-American company, and I also have a connection to the Alaska Commercial Company. In the 1970s, Volney Richmond owned the company, and he decided to divest. And he worked with our friend John Nordstrom in Seattle. They stripped off the Anchorage store, the Fairbanks store, and a couple of others. And what they were left with was some trading posts. And those were the trading posts of American Commercial, Alaska Commercial. And they were the ones that the local people bought. A company called CEDC, Community Enterprise Development Corporation, which was an offshoot of President Johnson's War on Poverty, received a grant to buy those stores, as opposed to a group of Texas hunters that wanted to buy them to use them as a tax shield for their hunting in Alaska. Little known facts. So I was the president and CEO of Community Enterprise Development Corporation, which owned the Alaska Commercial Company through a holding company. And I was the chairman of the holding company. So I was in direct control of the company. A far cry from my grandfather who hunted otters. So it was full circle, kind of fun. Today, I thought I'd just really touch on a couple of things that have been mentioned numerous times, but why do people come to Alaska? You ever think about it? When you really scrape it all off, there's only about 3 reasons. Opportunity. The jobs here are good if you can get one. There's money here to be made. Fisheries, timber, oil. There's opportunity here. Adventure. Hey, it's the last frontier, right? I'm gonna go build a cabin it's my last opportunity to be a true American. We have a population of those individuals. And then there's a group that I call the runaways. Alaska's just far enough from the family that I can get. And believe it or not, we have those people. And then of course there's the military. We have a very nice population that arrived with the military. But we go back to Alaska Commercial Company, how'd they get here? And it was opportunity. So it was recognized opportunity. But let's think about this a minute. It's 1870. What's going on in America? Gold rushes over in California, okay? Indians have pretty well been rounded up for the most part. It's kind of a, there's a big gap in there. It's a time of risk, a lot of risk. What courage did it take some people in California to decide to take a shot on a project in Alaska? Now, everybody here has heard the conversation from your father, your grandfather. You're driving down the road, and the old man looks over and he says, see that 20 acres? Could have bought that for $500. Lost opportunity. No courage. Maybe didn't have the money, but courage. California, Alaska. Now, let's think about it. How big is that risk? How big is that risk? There's no government there. The Treaty of Cession has no land title in it. Can you own anything up there? We don't know where the boundaries are in 1870. They're not resolved till 1905. This is high risk stuff. Takes a tremendous amount of courage. I don't have that kind of courage, I'll tell you right up front. no government. And we're gonna play with a high value international commodity. We're gonna play with fur. All nations want a piece of it. And you're in California, and you're gonna take a shot at it. That's a lot of risk and a lot of courage. And my hat is off to those guys. Now, why did it work? Why did it work? I am absolutely convinced it worked because of ethics, commitment, and organization. And that is a foundation of what I consider the second best tribe in Alaska. So, incredible. So they win. They win. And they pull it off, and they make it work. But what they did for me and my fellow Alaskans today is they set a standard of operation. And that standard of operation moves forward through time. As fisheries are developed, you have to have a foundation of organization. As timber is harvested in Southeast, you have to have an organization. You have to have discipline. And they set a standard. And that standard has carried forward through time, and we see it today with our industries developing our oil on the slope. And it begins with that second best tribe. Thank you.
Well, I'm really delighted to be here, and I want to address esteemed rabbis, ladies, gentlemen, thank Rabbi Greenberg for his vision in creating the Alaska Museum, Alaska Jewish Museum, which is an incredible contribution to our life here in Anchorage. It's just really wonderful. And I want to thank my co-captain on this voyage, Leslie Freed, who we butted heads now and then, but we got her done. We couldn't have made port, however, without our navigators, Rex Wilhelm and Walt Pickett from the Alaska Commercial Company, who made everything available to us. They shared artifacts, they shared company records, they provided assistance for us to come and look at things, and little tidbits of history here and there that we were able to roll into the work that we were doing. So thank you very much. So now what I'm supposed to talk about is trade and transportation. What Hayward Hutchinson purchased from the Russian-American company was a number of primitive fur trading outposts scattered along coastal Alaska, which ACC then developed into a chain of mercantile stores. Now, it's kind of hard for us to understand why this is such a big deal, but you have to remember that during that time, there was no government. The military, US military, was administering the territory, and not very well at that. They were kicked out later, but that's another story. This is really an incredible feat. The entire territory had no civil government, no banks. As was mentioned earlier, you could not buy or sell property. You could not survey and write up a deed and build a building. You couldn't do any of that because there were none of those things in place that we now take for granted. And there were no provisions made for the indigenous peoples of Alaska. There was no Bureau of Indian Affairs. There was no thought given to how they were going to make a living when their subsistence living was basically taken from them. It was given over to rogue whalers and sealers, people coming in to exploit what resources there were. And they were left out of the picture pretty much. And then the nearest wholesale warehouse to provide commodities for this store was nearly 2,000 miles away in San Francisco. So the only way they could get product up here was by sea. And the history of Alaska is basically a maritime history, which really we need to recognize. But these ACC stores replaced the small trading huts with clapboard buildings. They built wharves, they built warehouses. And more importantly, what these stores became was a focus of community development. In this process, the indigenous natives, the Unangang, Inupiaq, and Yupik, who had suffered tremendously under the serfdom imposed by the Russians, were now exposed to the American culture of capitalism, where they were paid for their labors and offered the amenities of modern living in the form of various commodities, clothing, tools, building materials, household goods, etc. In many places like Bethel, Fairbanks, Unalaska, Kodiak, ACC stores were the secular heart of the village. Important community meetings were held there. Sometimes funerals, civic celebrations. Mainly, each store helped outfit hunters for seasonal maritime hunting expeditions for sea otter, for fox, and sea lion. The company transported these hunters sometimes on the decks of their ships and took them out to the farther islands and the waters where there was still wildlife. The company set up bank accounts for the hunters in San Francisco because, of course, there were no banks up here. And in fact, it's kind of interesting because under the Russian model, they were given chits, little bits of paper that they could take to the traders and then try and trade for whatever items they might need. Now they had American money. However, there was no bank. And so what are you going to do? Well, the company did chits, but they also established bank accounts and let these people have a taste of how does capitalism work? Here's how it works. You get your money for your labor, you invest it, or you save it, or you spend it as you see fit. And this was a whole new world for these people. It was very unlike the paternalistic Russian model. And the ACC implemented what I realized was a more individually affirming model that strove to reward the hunters by paying a fair price for their furs, which enabled them in turn to purchase products to support the new American lifestyle. Now, all this developing trade was made possible by the investment of the Alaska Commercial Company in the largest and most modern merchant shipping fleet on the Pacific Ocean and the Yukon River during those days. At the peak of their corporate power, around 1901, ACC operated more than 30 watercraft. They commissioned the building of numerous vessels, steam-powered ocean-going cargo ships like the iron-hulled St. Paul and the steamship Dora, state-of-the-art flat-bottom, stern-wheeled steamships for the Yukon River trade that extended all the way up to Dawson City in Canada. Lighters, barges, dories, tenders ferried passengers and goods from the larger vessels anchored offshore through the surf to the smaller villages where no docks could possibly be built because of the weather. And I'm delighted to say that this exhibit features one of these ships who's near and dear to my heart. This ship went on to great fame, sailing the waters known as the Westward from Sitka to Atka and up into the Bristol Bay and beyond the Seward Peninsula to Nome. This ship was the steamship Dora. We were given kind permission to bring you a three-dimensional model of this ship built by Resurrection Bay Historical Society's Dennis McLean. The Dora brought the mail, hauled teachers, gold seekers, even tourists. She holds the record to this day, I believe, as the longest serving vessel in Alaska from 1880 to 1920. We've also included a great maritime chart of Alaska showing where all the company stores were and the ship routes that they had to have in place to bring their product to Alaska. and a beautiful shipwright's drawing of an engineering plan for the Sternwheeler Alice, which was built and served for many years on the Yukon River. So I am really proud to present you with this story of Alaska's first and longest existing business enterprise, the Alaska Commercial Company, in this virtual exhibit hall. We sincerely hope you go and visit and spend some time and learn about the history of Alaska and enjoy. Thank you.
I'll try to bring Leslie back just for a moment. So Leslie, can you hear me?
Hi. Hi there. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We've got we're just now getting over our time period, but I would like,
Okay.
if anyone has a question for you. Yes,
I hope I can answer it without Penelope here.
do your best.
So do I need to talk loud so she can hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to go to the Bancroft Archives in Berkeley.
Oh, yes.
In there was an amazing photo album of a trip Mr. Gerstle took in the late 1800s all around the Alaska coast, visiting the trading posts with what was then state-of-the-art photographs of the villages and the communities and the stores. And I was wondering if you folks have copies of the images from that album.
I don't think we do. We have a bunch of images of the stores that we've included online in the exhibit. That comes from a different place, from one of the storekeepers, from the Laney collection. It's from what we call the Laney collection, and we have not actually cataloged that yet. But Penelope and I are planning to go down to the archive that you're talking about to look at that. And I'm so glad you brought that up. I don't know if she's watching. She's feeling very, very ill today, but I'll mention that, what you said.
Yeah, when I saw that album, it looked like nobody had looked at it for decades, and it had some wrong labels on it, and it wasn't in archival boxes and all that stuff. And the staff there took it and they said they were gonna rebox it with all the current stuff, and they corrected some of the place names.
What was it, Gerstle's photo album?
Yeah, it was Gerstle's photo album. So I think if you contact the Bancroft Archive people and look up Gerstle, they'll find it for you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Those pictures in a published Alaska book.
Yes, yes. We want to include as many pictures as we can get away with. They tell a story, you know. So.
But we have a bit of a time
Thank you.
crunch here. I think we could take one more question for Leslie, if you have one about the exhibit at the Alaska Jewish Museum, or what we were just hearing in the film. Yes.
No, I just have one. I just know that Northern Commercial took over a lot of the buildings. I didn't know how they were associated with ACC.
Oh, yes. I think what happened was, hang on a second. The, let's see. Let's see, when was that? Yeah. What was the question again? I'm sorry.
I didn't know if Northern Commercial was associated with ACC or how they acquired those buildings. I know that there was a period of time in the 70s where they transferred ownership to Northern Commercial.
Well, in 1890, the North American Commercial Company acquired the second Pribilof Island lease, the second 20-year lease. I know that. And then let's see. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, the ACC merged with the International Mercantile Marine Company and Alaska Goldfields to form two new companies, the Northern Navigation Company and the Northern Commercial Company. And that was 1901.
Okay.
So I think there's a difference between the Northern Commercial Company and the North American Commercial Company, which got the second 20-year lease. That was the NACC instead of the NAC. There are so many names, it's kind of confusing.
I'll have to look that up. Thank you.
Yes, sure, one quick one.
Is the exhibit physically in the Jewish Museum or is it online or both?
It is online. It's a virtual exhibit. We wanted very much, or we would still like to have a physical on-site exhibit, but I don't know if you know this, but we are teeny tiny. The museum is a converted ATM machine building, believe it or not. And so I decided, rather than wait for the unknown day when we can enlarge or have a new building, we decided we're going to pursue this virtual exhibit and get going with it and have as many things in it that could be readily transferred to a physical exhibit. So it's definitely been a challenge. It's our first virtual exhibit, actually.
Another quick question.
How do we access it online?
Yeah, what is it? Can you tell us?
You would go to the Alaska Jewish Museum.com, and on the home page, you'll see, I think it's something like view our new exhibit or something like that. And it's from purchase to prosperity. Also, it's just under our exhibits link, under our exhibit section as well. On the online, yes.
Okay, is that, Leslie, is that alaskajewishmuseum.org?
.com.
No, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think thank you, Leslie, and thanks to Penelope too.
Yeah, Penelope, without Penelope, I think this would have been pretty much impossible. It's funny, I'm more of a kind of a storyteller, visual person, and Penelope is like a historian, and people ask me if I'm a historian. I have an art background, and I said, well, I might be sort of a historian just by doing maybe for the last 11 years, but the way she thinks and the way I think made a good combination.
Thanks, Leslie. We're now breaking up for a break.
Okie dokie.
Thank you
Thanks,
very much.
everybody. Thank you.